Hey, what's up, y'all? Good morning. It is a beautiful day. Sun is shining, birds are chirping. Although the wind chime over there was rattling, whatever you want to call it, a little bit, but not anymore. Hopefully, we'll be able to hear it pretty soon, though. It's a nice sound. But today, we got two important things. We're talking about the symbolism of the Book of Revelations and the context of the Book of Revelations. So we'll start with the context. Revelation is written by John of Patmos. And that's from the Book of Revelation, that's pretty much all we know about him. He lives on the island of Patmos, and his name is John. But we can assume that John that wrote the Book of Revelation is the same John that wrote the Gospel of John, the three letters of John, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. So, you know why we can assume that? Because the Gospel of John is a testimony to Jesus Christ, and in Revelation he is testifying to what he saw as presented by the angel and by Jesus and stuff. So he's got experience writing about testimony, and he also has experience writing about he's writing letters. He's got experience with that with 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John. And the Book of Revelation is really a letter to 7 churches in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. So, he's got all this experience already, and he's already been really close to Jesus. So it really just makes sense that John of Patmos is the John that we know from the New Testament. It doesn't really make sense that Jesus would just pull over some new John that has never existed in the Bible to write the Book of Revelation. It just doesn't make sense. So, what we know about John. He wrote the Gospel of John, and after that he went out into the world, as did all the other disciples, to make more disciples of Jesus, just as he told us in the Great Commission. So, and he was persecuted for that, just like all the other disciples. And all the other disciples were killed for it. But he wasn't. He was imprisoned by the Romans and poisoned while he was in prison in an attempt to kill him. But the Romans just couldn't kill him, and they had no idea why. So they exiled him to the island of Patmos, we assume, where he will just chill and live out the rest of his life. And there's a reason why John wasn't able to die. And there's a reason why John wasn't able to die in that Roman prison, because Jesus still had a plan for him to write the Book of Revelation. So, that's our context. John's at the island of Patmos. He's had this entire life of preaching the gospel and telling everybody about the great news of Jesus, and now it's about 60 years after the life of Jesus, so John's pretty old. It's about 90 to 95 AD. And he's pretty old. He's pretty much on the brink of death, and he has been for a while. And then Jesus, his angel actually, comes to him and says, I'm going to show you some stuff. You best write it down. So he writes it down. And that's the Book of Revelation. Now, number 2, we're talking about symbolism also. So, being exiled on an island, how could John just write to 7 churches who were nowhere around? It's because if he wrote literally, the guards and everything would not give that letter out. If it seemed to the guards, the Roman guards, that it was just a bunch of nonsense, then they would be fine. So he uses a bunch of symbols from the Old Testament so that the Christians that he were writing to would understand it, but everybody that wasn't Christian would be like, oh, this is nonsense. This is not happening. So the entire book is symbolic. It's all spiritually symbolic, or just symbolic in general, and you can't take any of it literally. So, we've already talked about one symbol too, being dressed in white spiritually. And it's talking about not wearing white clothing or anything like that. It's being cleansed by Jesus' blood on the cross. So that's just an example of one symbol. And another symbol right at the beginning, actually at the end of chapter 1 of Revelation, the very last bit, in verse 20, Jesus is talking about the symbols of him that's around him. He's got 7 lampstands and 7 stars right out in his hand. And he directly tells John what they mean. The 7 stars represent the angels of the church, and the lampstands represent the churches. The church is the holding of the light. And since Jesus is the light of the world, he tells us to be the light of the world. It makes sense. The church is holding up the light of the world, the Christians that are spreading the gospel and making Jesus known and changing people's lives. And then the 7 stars, I mean, you think, oh, the angel of the church, maybe it's like a guardian angel thing. No. The angel, it also means a messenger, and it's really the representatives of the churches. So whether it be the priests of the churches, the ministers of the churches, whether it be just the general representatives of the churches, that's what he's meaning with the stars. That's just some examples of the symbols. We'll get into Revelation chapter 1 a little bit more tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed this new stuff. Love you guys. Like, comment. Peace.